Ahoy hoy ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Hearts of Iron 4 video. If you haven't seen my last video, then you can go check it out. And yeah, I'm just going to be going over what I'd like to see in terms of improvements to democratic countries, and improvements I'd like to see in terms of the Soviet Civil War, and improvements I'd like to see to the spy intelligence agencies. Oh boy, they need work. But without further ado, let's get into it. Now, it's no secret that in Hearts of Iron 4, democratic countries are very underpowered. They don't get certain abilities, and they tend to have a limited amount of agency in terms of the war effort. Now, in order to improve their playability, as well as their agency within the game, I would like to see their Army, Navy, and Air experience points boosted, as well as their command power cap and their command power gain. I would also like to see them be able to join wars on behalf of a country, even though they're not part of their faction. Now, of course, the U.S. should be limited in this area because the U.S. is very OP. But in terms of other countries, say if you wanted to be a democratic Hungary or a democratic Bulgaria, you should be able to join wars in order to defend another country's sovereignty in order to increase your agency within the game. Now, it's hard for democratic countries to actually get involved in the war, so I think this would be a way to allow them to, when they're ready, enter the war in order to defend sovereignty of another country, though of course that should also be limited in terms of how that country feels about that democratic country. So as a democratic nation, you would have to get them to like you, maybe giving them favorable trade deals or something along those lines in order to boost your ability to defend their sovereignty should they be attacked. Now, I also think democratic countries should be able to get an increased product efficiency growth as well as an increased product efficiency cap to better reflect their economic power. So those are just some of the changes I'd like to see. Well, those are the current changes I'd like to see in terms of empowering democratic countries to make them more viable in-game. Now, the Soviet Union has one of the best focus trees in the game, in my opinion. And a large part of that is due to their Civil War mechanics. I do like the paranoia system to a certain degree, but I would like to see some fixes in terms of the differences between the left opposition and the right opposition. Now, the left opposition, I think, should make it easier to control more territory prior to the Civil War, as well as having a larger pool of manpower and a larger amount of divisions. I also think that maybe giving them a greater range in terms of supply would be beneficial in that regard. And in terms of the right opposition, I want to focus a lot less on RNG. I think there should be more decisions that you should be able to make in terms of isolating Stalin and performing the coup so that you don't have to rely too much on RNG in order to secure power. I also think that at the start of the war, they should get more generals, more industry, as well as more foreign support in terms of investment. I also think that after the war, you should get, say, more political power on the right, as well as bonuses from foreign investment, and, say, more resources. After the war on the left, I'd say that they should get more command power and maybe more stability and more war support. Something to make the differences between the two a little more dynamic. And I also think this is where you can have a democratic focus tree. Right here, there's a focus called Return Democracy to the Party. I think that here you can have a democratic focus tree. Say removing the NKVD, empowering freedom of speech, implementing a form of capitalism, something along those lines you could put right in here. And I think that would add to a lot more dynamic gameplay. Alright, now it's time for everyone's favorite part of the game, the intelligence agency. Right? Right? Yeah. No, this entire thing needs a complete overhaul. Oh boy. Oh boy. Where do we start? I think we should start with the idea that you should be able to place your spies anywhere in a country. Because if it's not near the front line, then you're not getting the intel that you necessarily want. You should be able to put your spy anywhere you want in the country and gain their intel from that territory. It would make a lot more sense because you're the one putting the spy into a particular place. Maybe you can make it more difficult or cost political power or something in order to put a spy in a different spot, but I still think you should be able to do it. Okay? It makes sense that you should be able to do it. And another thing is spies have randomized traits right now. This is very annoying because you cannot necessarily train your spies to have specific traits that you would want in order to accomplish the goals that you would want your spies to accomplish. Now, you do have operative training, but this still gives RNG in terms of what traits your new spies come with. Not to mention, you have limited slots. You have to become a spy master, or you have to get an elusive gentleman in order to expand your spy tree. In order to expand the amount of spies you have. And in order to get new spies that have different traits, you need to have more slots and put more people in order to shuffle the deck, so to speak. That is very, very annoying. And it doesn't reflect what you want to do with your spy agency. So what I would like to see is the ability of having a spy tree in terms of traits, where utilizing your spies and developing your spy agency allows you to increase the traits of specific spies that, say, make them more sneaky so that they have a lower chance of getting caught, but that might also reduce the speed of their intel network gain because they're being careful. Or if you want to increase the network gain that you're getting faster, that might increase the odds of them getting caught. You could also focus on maybe sabotage missions or assassination missions or stuff like that in terms of what traits you want to focus on for which spies. It would allow a degree of customization that allows you to actually utilize the spies in the ways that you want, instead of relying on RNG. I also think that you should be able to utilize, say, command power in order to expand your slots for how many spies you can have. This would increase you could do that with either command power or political power or something, so that you don't have to rely on the size of your faction, and you don't have to rely on taking up an advisor slot in order to just get one more spy. which would also make the missions being taken on more effective, because some missions take 3 spies to do. And if you only have 3 spies, then you lose intel network, or if one of your spies get captured, then you can't carry out the mission. It is very hard to actually make investments into the intelligence agency when it's this limiting. But let's move on to the spy missions. Oh boy, these need an overhaul, because the only one that people usually use is prepare collaboration governments, because it reduces the amount of victory points you need in order to capitulate a country. That's the only one that I see anyone really using. Why? Because these don't impact gameplay really. You can make them impact gameplay though, by having effective spy missions. One of the first things you can have as a spy mission is misinformation. Being able to plant false information in the opposing country so that they either believe you have more factories than you do, or less factories than you do, or more divisions or less divisions, depending on whether or not you want them to believe you're more of a threat or less of a threat. That would actually add a lot of dynamics, especially to multiplayer games, where you wouldn't necessarily know how many divisions or whether or not what you're looking at is misinformation, which would add a lot more dynamics to the gameplay. Other missions that you can have, say propaganda missions, where instead of having it just be a button here that you press, you could have it as a dedicated mission, so that maybe you want to increase unrest because you want to lower their stability, or you want to have a propaganda mission where you want to demoralize the population and lower their war support. That might create strikes, or it might have desertions or mutinies, something that would affect gameplay. You can also have a propaganda mission where you hold ideological rallies and boost the popularity of a specific ideology in the country, maybe to flip it, or maybe just to reduce resistance once you invade. Something else I'd like to see in gameplay is POWs. I'd like to see POWs in gameplay where, say, you get a bunch of your troops trapped in a pocket, maybe you're a small nation. What if you could have a spy mission where you could free POWs and maybe get some of that manpower back? Again, something that would allow you to avoid disasters, avoid rage quitting a game because you got a bunch of your troops encircled and now your manpower situation is utterly horrible. If you had elements where you could fix that situation a little bit, you get a certain percentage of those POWs back once you free them. Have it be something that materially affects gameplay. Now, this is a big one. Now, something else that should be added to help democracies become actual viable parts of the game is maybe not having collaboration governments, but having liberation governments, forming contexts where you could actually cause a civil war. And maybe it also adds to your war participation as well, something along those lines, which would make democratic nations more viable as playthroughs. In other spy missions, there's already a spy mission to steal blueprints, but you don't necessarily know what blueprints you're going to be attempting to steal. Now, infiltrating civilian administration just allows you to potentially steal industry secrets, but it doesn't tell you what industry secrets you're going after, and it's randomized. Same with infiltrating the army. You get military blueprints, but you don't know if you're getting guns, tanks, or artillery. If you would be able to choose those, then it would actually make that mission viable. Because, say, if you're going for an air and infantry build and you get tank blueprints, that doesn't help you. Something else that would actually have a material impact and make people want to go after blueprints is maybe it improves the research speed that you have for that specific tech. Because now you have blueprints, you're not starting from scratch. So it could actually help your research situation, which again has material impact on gameplay. Now, of course, you do the same thing for infiltrating the Navy, infiltrating the Air Force, etc., where you could choose which specific blueprints you go after. Infiltrating the Army, Civilian, Air Force, and Navy should also open up other spy missions. Say, after you infiltrate the civilian administration, maybe you could actually sabotage a portion of the industry, or sabotage specific infrastructure. After you infiltrate the civilian administration, maybe you could also have a spy mission where you could attempt to assassinate the political advisors. Or maybe you have another mission on top of that where you could infiltrate the cabinet or the political party, and then have another mission where you could attempt the assassination of the political leader. You could go after Mussolini, and the difficulty of that mission, maybe it's based on how popular the party is. Something along those lines, where if you wanted to assassinate the political leader, then maybe you want to, before that, reduce the amount of popularity that that political leader has in the country in order to increase the odds of your assassination attempt going off. Now, say after you infiltrate the army, maybe you could have missions where you could sabotage supply depots or sabotage railway networks. Maybe also after you infiltrate the army, you could infiltrate the chain of command and attempt to assassinate the general or one of the field marshals. And of course, the difficulty would be based on how skilled that general or field marshal is, which could have material impacts on how the war is shaping out. If you infiltrate the Navy, maybe you have the ability to sabotage ports or sabotage specific ships. Maybe you could damage dockyards, something along those lines. If you infiltrate the Air Force, maybe you have the ability to destroy some planes on the ground, or maybe you have the ability to make airfields unusable, which could allow you to gain air superiority in an area that you couldn't before. And what you could do with all of these things is maybe you have the ability to research coordinated attacks on supply depots, ports, railway stations, and infrastructure. So if you're doing maybe a D-Day landing, you have the ability to hit supply depots in the back, or hit railway networks to prevent them from moving troops around. In order to do that, maybe you could attach spies to specific army groups. So if you have an army doing a landing and you attach spies to it, you could have the coordinated attack go off when the invasion launches. Maybe if you have spies attached to your army group, the coordinated attacks go off when the plan is launched. So those can have actual material impacts on how the game is playing out, and would actually help people utilize the intelligence agency. Even if you didn't have coordinated attacks go off, if you just had spies in the area, maybe that reduces the landing penalty for your landing craft because they have advanced knowledge about what they're facing on the other side. So those are some of the general improvements I'd like to see for the intelligence agencies. I'd like to see a couple specific improvements, say democratic countries having slower intel gain at the beginning, but having, over the course of the game, have their intel network speed increase. And for more authoritarian countries, maybe have their intel network at the beginning of the game be very be very fast but degrade over time. Just a couple of the changes I'd like to see based on ideology, so people might be influenced one way or the other to play different types of nations. Anyway, that's all the time I have for this video. If you liked it, like, share, and subscribe. If you have any comments about what you'd like to see in terms of changes to the spy agency or other types of gameplay, put them in the comments below. If you have any comments you'd like to make on the changes I would like to see in the game, put them in the comments. I'd love to hear them. Until next time, ciao to y'all.